turned to a strange human to survive. The cargo bay of the stellar worm hummed with the familiar drone of hyperspace engines as Ferret completed his routine inventory check. As a maintenance technician on one of humanity's deep space freight vessels, he'd grown accustomed to the solitude of these long hauls between star systems. The rest of the crew was in cryosleep, leaving him alone with his thoughts and the endless corridors of the ship. That's when he heard a sound that didn't belong. A soft, mewling cry echoed from behind a stack of cargo containers marked with draconian glyphs. Ferret's hand instinctively moved to his plasma cutter, but curiosity overrode caution. He navigated through the maze of boxes until he found the source. A small, shimmering creature no larger than a house cat, with scales that shifted between emerald and sapphire in the dim lighting. A dragon hatchling, Ferret's breath caught. The Draconians were one of the galaxy's most powerful species. Ancient, proud, and notoriously protective of their young. Finding an abandoned hatchling was not just unusual, it was unprecedented. The creature looked up at him with eyes that held an intelligence far beyond its apparent age. Its wings, still translucent and undeveloped, trembled as it cowered against the cold metal floor. Scorch marks on the nearby containers told a story Ferret could piece together. Someone had deliberately left it here to die. "Hey there, little one," Ferret whispered, kneeling down slowly. The hatchling hissed, a pitiful sound that barely produced a spark. "I'm not going to hurt you." He'd heard the stories, of course. Draconian culture was rigid, hierarchical. Hatchlings born with defects or unusual colorations were sometimes discarded. This one's scales, which couldn't seem to settle on a single hue, marked it as different. In Draconian society, different meant weak. Ferret reached into his supply pack and pulled out a ration bar. The hatchling sniffed cautiously, then lunged forward, devouring it with desperate hunger. As it ate, Ferret noticed the creature's ribs pressing against its scales. It had been abandoned for days, perhaps weeks. "All right, buddy," Ferret said, making a decision that would change everything. "Let's get you somewhere warm." Over the following weeks, Ferret transformed a disused storage room into a makeshift nursery. He named the hatchling Ember, despite its ever-changing colors. The ship's medical database had limited information on draconian biology, but Ferret improvised. He adjusted the room's temperature to match draconian homeworld conditions, synthesized a protein-rich diet from ship stores, and even rigged up a UV lamp after noticing Ember's scales dulled without proper light. But it was more than just physical care. Ferret talked to Ember constantly, reading aloud from his digital library, explaining the workings of the ship's systems, sharing stories of Earth. The hatchling proved remarkably intelligent, its eyes tracking Ferret's movements with growing understanding. One night, or what passed for night in the artificial day cycle of the ship, Ember fell ill. Its scales lost their luster, turning a sickly gray, and its breathing became labored. Ferret's hands trembled as he searched the medical database, finding nothing. Draconian physiology was a closely guarded secret, and the information available to humans was superficial at best. "Come on, Ember. Stay with me," Ferret pleaded, cradling the small creature against his chest. He could feel its rapid heartbeat, irregular and weakening. Then he remembered a passing conversation with a xenobiologist years ago. Dragons weren't just biological entities. They were partially composed of exotic matter, requiring specific electromagnetic frequencies to maintain cellular stability. It was why they could breathe fire, why they could survive in vacuum for short periods. Ferret carried Ember to the engine room, where the ship's fusion reactor generated intense electromagnetic fields. He carefully positioned the hatchling near a maintenance access panel, adjusting the shielding to expose it to controlled doses of radiation. For hours, he waited, monitoring both Ember and the reactor levels. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, color began returning to the hatchling's scales. Its breathing steadied. By morning, Ember was awake, looking at Ferret with what could only be described as Gratitude. 3 months into the voyage, the stellar worm received an unexpected transmission. A draconian warship was requesting permission to board a routine inspection, they claimed. But Ferret knew better. Someone had reported the missing hatchling. Ferret's crewmates, now awake and aware of his secret, gathered in the cargo bay. Captain Maya, a stern woman with silver streaks in her dark hair, stood with her arms crossed, studying Ember, who had grown to the size of a large dog. "You realize what you've done, Ferret?" Maya asked, her voice tight. Harboring draconian property without authorization could mean interstellar incident, prison, war, even property. Ferret's jaw clenched. Maya. They threw him away like garbage. He would have died. That was their choice to make, not yours. No. Ferret stepped forward, placing himself between Maya and Ember. That's where you're wrong. The moment they abandoned him, he ceased being their concern. I found him. I saved him. And I'll be damned if I hand him back to the people who left him to die. Ember, sensing the tension, moved to Ferret's side. The hatchling's scales rippled with protective colors, reds and oranges that spoke of fire and defiance. Maya sighed, her expression softening. You know I have to let them board, Ferret. I don't have a choice. Then I'll face them. The draconian delegation consisted of 3 adults, their massive forms barely fitting through the ship's corridors. Their leader, a scarlet-scaled warrior named Vexthor, towered over Ferret, smoke curling from his nostrils. You harbor our refuse. Vexthor growled, his translator struggling with the disdain in his voice. Return it, and we will forget this transgression. His name is Ember, Ferret said calmly, though his heart hammered. Vexthor's eyes narrowed. You dare defy draconian law? That thing is defective. Color-shifting scales indicate genetic instability. It brings shame to its lineage. Genetic instability? Ferret laughed bitterly. I've spent 3 months with Ember. He's healthier, smarter, and more adaptable than any fixed-color dragon could be. You didn't abandon a defect. You abandoned evolution. The cargo bay fell silent. Even Maya looked stunned. Vexthor leaned closer, his breath hot enough to singe. Bold words. Human. But ultimately meaningless. You have no claim. A roar shattered the tension. Ember, who had been hidden behind cargo containers, emerged. In 3 months, he'd grown. But more than that, he'd transformed. His scales now cycled through colors with purpose: blues for calm, reds for anger, golds for joy. He positioned himself in front of Ferret, wings spread despite their incomplete development. A thin stream of multicolored flame dancing from his jaws. The message was clear. You'll have to go through me. Vexthor stared, genuine shock crossing his reptilian features. Impossible. It's bonded. To a human? Apparently so, Maya interjected, stepping forward. And according to Galactic Treaty 7 Alpha, bonded pairs cannot be separated without consent of both parties. I believe you'll find that Ember and Ferret are in agreement. Vexthor's claws scraped against the metal floor. For a long moment, the standoff continued. Then, surprisingly, the draconian warrior bowed his head, a gesture of respect among his kind. Perhaps, Vexthor said slowly, we were mistaken. The laws are ancient, but not infallible. This one has chosen, and been chosen in return. There is honor in that. As the draconians departed, Vexthor paused at the airlock. Human. Ferret. Raise him well. Perhaps he will teach us what we have forgotten, that strength comes in many forms. Later, in the quiet of the storage room turned nursery, Ferret sat with Ember curled around him, the dragon's warmth seeping through his uniform. Maya had granted them both extended leave, with the understanding that Ember would need proper training. You know what this means, right? Ferret murmured, scratching behind Ember's horns. We're making history. First human-dragon bond. They'll study us, write papers, make documentaries. Ember's response was a contented purr, his scales shifting to a peaceful lavender. Ferret smiled. Yeah, I don't care about that stuff either. As long as we're together, we'll figure it out. Outside the viewport, stars stretched into infinite lines as the stellar worm jumped to hyperspace, carrying an unlikely pair toward an uncertain future but one they would face together. Because that's what humans did best. They adapted, they persevered, and they never abandoned those who needed them, even when everyone else had given up.